All right, guys, it is time for our fourth and final Labapalooza lab. This is the Precipitate Formation Lab. To start with, we need to set it up in our notebook. It's going to be number 32, called just Precipitate Lab. Now, that word precipitate, we're going to talk about in just a second. But first, let's recall that there are 4 signs of a chemical reaction. The first one, which we've already seen, is gas production or formation. The second one, which we've already seen, is temperature change. The third one, which we saw yesterday, is the color change. And the final one is called precipitate formation. And that is the sign we're going to be looking at today. Now, you guys are familiar with the word precipitate as part of precipitation, meaning to have something fall from the sky. You might think that it has to do with a change from a solid to a liquid or a liquid to a gas or vice versa, but precipitate actually just means to fall. And the reason why this is called a precipitate is because it occurs when you take 2 liquids and you get a solid as one of the products. That solid usually forms tiny clumps that either float to the surface or sink to the bottom. In the case of today's lab, it's going to float to the surface. So that name, precipitate, may not make much sense because it's not falling, but they do typically fall. So our question is really simple. How can we prove a chemical reaction happened? How can we prove a chemical reaction happened? And your hypothesis, you will fill out after you watch the demonstration video. Because we're going to be mixing 2 liquids and creating a solid that will float at the surface. But in order to prove that it was actually a chemical reaction, we have to prove that that solid is a new substance, not something that was already there. And so you're going to come up with a way to prove that, to show for sure that that is a new substance. So after the hypothesis, as you guys know for sure by now, we are going to write down our methods and materials, or materials and methods, whichever you prefer. In the materials section, there is going to be a smaller box today because there are not as many materials. As before, you can write them down as you watch the demo video, or you can write them down as you do the lab, but you have to keep a list of your materials. Methods, you're going to write down your steps that you follow during the lab. The steps are all going to be the same at the beginning as we create the precipitate, but then the steps that you use to verify that it's a new substance, those will be different for you. All right, on to the data section. Now, for this lab, the data section is really weird, okay? Because you are going to be taking 2 substances and combining them, and you're going to have a beaker. And in that beaker, there will be a clear liquid at the bottom, and there will be a solid white substance at the top. That is your precipitate. And all you have to write down for your data is what you observe that shows that it's not one of the ingredients. So this is not going to be numbers. There's not going to be a table. You're just going to describe what do you observe about that precipitate that shows that it's not the same as the ingredients that went in. All right? That's it for your notebook. All right, guys, so this is the fourth and final lab, and demonstrating it's really super simple because I'm not actually going to do it for you. You're going to have a medium-sized beaker, you're going to have a small amount of Red Bull, not a whole can, and you're going to have a small amount of whole milk. And all you're going to do is combine the Red Bull and the whole milk in the beaker, make sure they have lots of contact with each other, and then you're going to leave them alone while they react. That precipitate will form at the top, and while it's forming, we're going to do something a little bit different, and then we'll come back to our experiments a few minutes later. You're also going to have a small plastic cup and a popsicle stick, and your job is to sample some of that precipitate and try to show some kind of evidence that it's not Red Bull or milk, but something different. And so you won't be able to use your sense of taste, but you can use other senses like sight and touch and smell to verify that it is not the same as Red Bull and milk, but something new. Safety for this lab is just going to be lab aprons, which are optional. You will not need safety glasses, and if you'd rather not wear the apron, you don't have to. Okay? All right, enjoy.